On a bright Monday morning, I walked into school with my heart racing. I was excited to learn more English. As the class settled down, one brave student raised her hand and asked our teacher an interesting question. She looked a bit nervous but determined. "I would really like to practice speaking with people around me," she said, "but I'm afraid of making mistakes. I don't want to look silly. Can you help me?" Our teacher smiled warmly at her. "That's a very good question," she said. "Making mistakes is something we all go through. It's a very interesting topic, actually. Many people have different thoughts about it. I want to share what I believe is the best way to handle mistakes. You see, I have learned many languages myself. I still keep learning new ones. Right now, I'm even trying to learn Spanish." The class listened closely, eager to hear more. When I speak Spanish, I don't worry about making mistakes at all. You know why? It's really simple. When I learned my first language, I didn't worry about making mistakes then, either. I just spoke. So why should I stress about it now? My main goal when I use any language is to share my ideas and thoughts. That is what matters the most. Her words filled the room with confidence. Everyone nodded, feeling a little braver. I thought about my own fears and how I wanted to speak up more. This was just the beginning of our journey together, and I knew I would learn so much more. As I settled into my cozy chair with a cup of tea, I thought about my journey to learn English. I remember sitting in my small room in England, feeling both excited and a little nervous. I knew that if I read a lot, practiced speaking, and even tried shadowing, where I mimic what others say, my Spanish would improve. Might sound really simple, but that's what I believe. After years of teaching and learning languages, I found that this method works wonders. It has helped me, and it has helped many of my students too. Whenever I speak, I focus only on that moment. I let go of my fears and just express myself. Right now, I know about 1,500 words in Spanish. That's about the same level as a 2-year-old child. But you know what? I feel proud of that. Every word I learn is a step forward. Each time I try to speak, I get a little better. I think about how children learn, so curious and brave. They don't worry about making mistakes. They just keep trying. That's how I want to be. As I sat there, I thought about my friends in class. They were also learning and struggling with their own languages. We would share laughs and mistakes together. It made the learning process so much fun. I realized we were all on this journey together, and that made it even more special. The more I practiced, the more I felt like I belonged. This was just the beginning of my adventure in England, and I couldn't wait to see how far I would go. As I sat in class, listening to my teacher talk about learning languages, I couldn't help but think about how children learn. You know, 2-year-old kids make a ton of mistakes when they talk. But do they worry? Not at all. They just keep chattering away in their native language, completely unbothered by the silly things they say. I watched my little cousin, who is just 2. He mixes up words and sometimes even makes up funny sounds. But he doesn't care. He laughs and keeps talking, like it's the most natural thing in the world. Then I thought about how things change as they grow. By the time kids turn 3, they make very few mistakes. And when they hit 4, they're chatting away like pros. It's amazing to see how they go from babbling to speaking clearly. They gain confidence with every word. Watching them made me realize something important. I should have the same attitude. If I want to learn English, I need to be brave like them. I need to let go of my fears and just speak, even if I mess up. I remember how my teacher said that making mistakes is part of learning. It's okay to stumble over words. It's okay to not be perfect. The important thing is to keep trying, just like those kids. I felt inspired by this idea. I thought about my classmates, many of whom were also learning and feeling nervous. We were all in the same boat. I could see their faces light up when they finally got a word right or made a sentence that made sense. I wanted to embrace that joy too. As I sat there, I made a promise to myself. I would speak more, worry less, and learn like a child. This was going to be my adventure, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead me. As I sat in class listening to my teacher, I felt a wave of excitement. She smiled at us and said, "Now most of you know about 2,000 words in English. That's a great achievement." I could see my classmates nodding, their faces lighting up with pride. So it is absolutely okay to make mistakes from time to time. Everyone does it. I thought about how true that was. Just the other day, I had mixed up some words while trying to explain something to a friend. I felt embarrassed at first, but my friend just laughed and said, "Don't worry, we all make mistakes." Hearing that made me feel better. It reminded me that learning is a journey, and nobody gets it perfect right away. Our teacher continued, "When you keep using English every day, you will find that there will be fewer and fewer mistakes in your speaking." I could picture myself practicing every day, chatting with my friends, and reading books. Each time I spoke, I would be getting better and better. I imagined standing in a cafe, ordering a cup of coffee in English without a single hesitation. I thought about my classmates again. They were all working hard, just like me. Some were shy, while others were a bit more confident. We all had different backgrounds and experiences, but we shared the same goal. I remembered the time I had a small conversation with a stranger at the park. It was a bit scary, but it felt so good afterward. I realized that every little effort counts. With that in mind, I made a promise to myself. I would practice speaking as much as I could, even if I stumbled over my words. It was all part of the process. Mistakes didn't mean I was failing. They meant I was learning. I was ready for this adventure, ready to embrace every challenge. This journey in England was just getting started, and I was excited to see how much I would grow. As I sat in class one afternoon, our teacher shared some important wisdom. She looked around the room and said, "It is not possible to get better without making mistakes." I listened carefully, taking in every word. When you practice English, it is completely okay not to be perfect. Perfection comes with practice. Her voice was warm and encouraging, making me feel at ease. I thought about my own journey. I had made plenty of mistakes since arriving in England. Just the other day, I had tried to ask for directions, and I mixed up my words. Instead of getting frustrated, I laughed it off when the person looked confused. "Oops, I guess I need more practice," I had said with a smile. They smiled back, and I felt a little lighter. Our teacher continued, "Anyone who started to learn English began from the beginning, from the same level, which is level 0. I found that comforting. It made me think about all the famous people I admired who spoke English so well. They didn't just wake up one day and know everything. They had all started somewhere just like me. I remembered hearing stories about how some of my friends learned English. One friend told me that when he first came to England, he could barely say a sentence. But he practiced every day. He would talk to shopkeepers, try to order food, and even join small conversations with his neighbors. Now he spoke so confidently. I wanted to be like him. With that thought, I made a plan. I would practice more, even if I stumbled. I would talk to more people, read more books, and not be afraid to mess up. Each mistake would be a step toward improvement. I looked around at my classmates and I could see that they were all on their own journeys too. We were in this together, learning and growing. This journey in England was going to be full of adventures, and I was ready to embrace every moment of it. As I sat in my English class one sunny afternoon, our teacher started talking about learning languages. She said, "Learning languages is like learning to play a musical instrument. It needs training." I found this comparison really interesting. Just like a musician practices every day to get better, we have to practice our language skills too. When you start your training, it's not perfect at first. You make mistakes, and that's completely normal. I thought about when I first picked up a guitar. I remember how awkward my fingers felt on the strings. My first attempts to play a song were clumsy. I kept hitting the wrong notes and felt embarrassed. But each time I practiced, I got a little better. It was the same with my English. Just the other day, I had tried to have a conversation with a stranger at the bus stop. I mixed up some words, and we both laughed. "It's okay," I said, smiling. "I'm still learning." Our teacher smiled too and encouraged us to embrace our mistakes. "Take it as a necessary part of your learning process," she said. I realized that if I didn't go through this phase of making mistakes, I wouldn't be able to reach higher levels in my English skills. It was all part of the journey. With each conversation I had, I felt myself improving. Little by little, the mistakes became fewer. I remembered how my friend Maria told me she practiced by singing along to English songs. She would laugh at her own mistakes, but kept going. "It's fun, and I learn a lot," she said. That made me think. I could do the same. I decided that I would not let my mistakes hold me back. Instead, I would welcome them as stepping stones. I wanted to try new things, like speaking with my classmates more often. I could even join a local club or group where everyone was learning together. This journey in England was going to be filled with learning, laughter, and growth, and I was excited for every step of it. One day in class, our teacher shared some great advice that really stuck with me. She said, "If you want to make fewer mistakes, you should do a lot of reading and shadowing." I nodded, thinking about how much I loved stories and books. I remembered sitting in my room surrounded by piles of colorful books. Each one took me to a new place, full of adventure and excitement. Reading always made me feel good. Our teacher continued, "When you read, try to read aloud." I liked this idea. Reading aloud could help me hear the words better and practice my pronunciation. I could imagine myself in my room, reading my favorite stories out loud. I would pretend I was the characters, bringing the words to life. It sounded like fun. I thought about my experience in England so far. Every time I practiced, whether it was reading or talking to someone, I felt a little more confident. If I keep practicing like this, I will definitely make fewer mistakes, I told myself. I remembered the other day when I tried to order food at a cafe. I stumbled over a couple of words, but the cashier smiled and helped me out. I laughed it off and said, "I'm still learning." That moment made me realize that practice was key. The more I read and spoke, the more my skills would grow. I pictured myself joining a small book club where everyone shared their thoughts about different stories. We could read aloud together, laughing and helping each other with tough words. It would be a great way to practice. With each book I picked up, I felt a spark of excitement. I decided I would start reading every day, even if it was just a few pages. I wanted to dive into stories, practice speaking, and improve my English little by little. This journey was becoming more and more thrilling, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead me next. As I sat in our lively classroom, my teacher had a warm smile as she spoke. In real conversations, the most important thing is to focus on exchanging ideas, she said. Her words made me sit up a little straighter. I listened closely as she continued. Don't worry about making mistakes. I thought about how often I felt nervous when speaking English, afraid that I might say something wrong. But maybe I was missing the point. Just the other day, I was at a cafe trying to chat with a barista. I wanted to order a coffee, but when I spoke, I fumbled my words. At first, I felt embarrassed, but then I remembered what my teacher said. I shifted my focus. Instead of worrying, I smiled and just tried to express what I wanted. Can I have a hot drink? I said, feeling a bit silly. But the barista smiled back and understood me perfectly. We ended up talking about our favorite drinks, and it felt great. Our teacher went on, "When you speak, you are practicing changing your thoughts into words." I thought about how true that was. Every time I tried to say something, it was like my brain was working hard to connect my ideas with the right words. It wasn't always easy, but it was rewarding. I realized that making mistakes was part of this journey. It was how I learned. I also remembered my friend Mia. She had a different approach. When she first arrived in England, she would join local clubs to practice her speaking. She didn't focus on grammar or vocabulary in those moments. Instead, she talked to people about anything, food, hobbies, or even the weather. "I just love connecting with others," she told me once. "That's how I learn." Feeling inspired, I decided that I wanted to do the same. I would join a conversation group or even strike up talks with classmates during lunch. Every chance to speak was an opportunity to learn, and I wanted to embrace it. I wouldn't let the fear of making mistakes hold me back anymore. As I thought about this new plan, excitement bubbled inside me. I was ready to explore more of what England had to offer and to meet new people along the way. Each conversation would be a step forward, and I was eager to see how much I would grow. This journey was just beginning, and I felt hopeful for what lay ahead. One sunny afternoon in our English class, our teacher looked around at us with a warm smile. She could see some of us feeling nervous, so she decided to ease our worries. "Don't worry," she said gently. "Everybody who learns a foreign language makes mistakes from time to time. Even famous people like the bosses of big companies or politicians make mistakes too." I thought about that. It was comforting to know that Even those who seem so confident stumble sometimes. She continued, when you listen to these people on TV, you see that they don't care about mistakes. They focus on what's important, expressing their ideas. I nodded, realizing how true that was. I had seen interviews where leaders mixed up their words, but they kept going. They didn't let little mistakes stop them from sharing their thoughts. They spoke with passion, and that made their messages clear. Our teacher encouraged us, you should do the same. Don't let fear of making mistakes hold you back. Just speak up. Does it make sense? I felt a surge of confidence at her words. I looked around the room and saw a girl named Sarah. She often looked shy, and I knew she felt the same way I did. Sarah raised her hand and said softly, yes, thank you. I admired her courage. After class, I decided to talk to her. Hey, I liked what the teacher said today, I said with a smile. It makes me feel better about speaking. She smiled back, looking a bit relieved. Me too. I always worry about saying the wrong thing. We began chatting more about our fears. I shared a funny story about the time I tried to ask for directions and ended up mixing up the words. It made us both laugh. It's nice to know we're not alone in this, she said. We agreed to practice speaking together outside of class. We could talk about our favorite movies or what we wanted to do in England. As we walked out of the classroom, I felt lighter. The weight of my worries began to lift. I was excited about our plan. I knew that with every conversation, we would grow. Learning English would become more fun, and mistakes would just be part of the adventure. I couldn't wait to see how much we would improve together. This was just the beginning of our journey, and I was ready for all the experiences ahead.